Hey guys, tonight we dive into golden myths and divine grudges, where the sunlight doesn't just warm, it blinds, burns, and sometimes bites back. You stand barefoot on the soft, powdery ground just beneath the slopes of Mount Olympus, the morning light slicing across your face like a divine blade. Somewhere nearby, birds chirp in oddly harmonic intervals, as if tuned by divine hands. This is no ordinary day. It's your birthday, not just any birth, but yours. The dazzling Apollo, god-to-be, half-formed and full of fire. But wait, there's someone else. You're not alone. There, just beside you, eyes half-lidded and already unimpressed with the world, is your twin sister Artemis. You cry out. She doesn't. She's serene, self-contained. Later, they'll call her the goddess of the hunt, the moon, chastity. For now, she's just annoyingly calm. Your mother Leto is exhausted. Giving birth while being hunted by a jealous goddess will do that to a person. Hera, Zeus's wife, tried to curse her from finding any place to bear her children until the floating island of Delos offered sanctuary. Fringe scholars still argue whether Delos was a real place or more metaphora, nowhere that became everywhere. You just remember how your mother wept with relief as the island steadied itself under her pain. You stretch your tiny limbs and the sun answers. Your very breath is warm with prophecy. They say your first cries made the laurel trees bloom. Poetic. Sure, but don't get cocky yet. From the start, you shine. People don't just look at you, they squint. The 9 muses hum as you blink open your golden eyes. Your hair is sunlit bronze, your voice already tuned like a lyre, and Zeus. He sees himself in Eumenes, the temper for now. He grants you dominion over light, healing, music, truth, and archery. 5 talents for one god, bit much, maybe. But you're built for this. Still, your shine has edges. You don't realize it yet, but people will love you desperately, and also fear you quietly. You burn, and not everyone survives the warmth. As you grow, you study under Chiron, that horseman hybrid who's basically the galaxy's original homeschool. Dad, he teaches you medicine, philosophy, archery, and how not to accidentally smite someone during an argument. You learn quick. You're not like the other gods, more graceful, more curious. You care about order, about clarity. Chaos offends. Your symmetry, but not all, is smooth. You're constantly compared to your twin, Artemis, who moves silently, kills cleanly, and rarely looks back. You shine, she glides. People love her too, but differently. If you are the sun, she is the moon, cool, distant, and unbothered by applause. You want love desperately. She doesn't seem to need it. One afternoon, you overhear 2 nymphs whispering, "Apollo's too perfect." One says, "It's suspicious." You pretend not to hear, but it plants a seed. Perfection, you start to suspect, is not always adored. Despite it all, you're earnest. You want to be a god who helps. You heal, you inspire, you charm. When you play your lyre, even Zeus pauses. You sing, and mortals forget war. But there's a problem you can't charm away. Something dark, something ancient. Beneath Delphi, the site destined to become your temple of prophecy, lurks a python. Not just any snake, but the decaying spirit of Gaia's vengeance slithering. Venomous reminder that the world belonged to the earth before it ever bowed to Olympus. And here's the kicker. It haunts your mother. Before you were born, that creature chased her through mountains and islands. It tried to kill her. You were born into sunlight, but your legacy begins in pursuit of a monster. So you decide to kill it naturally. You're not just a god, you're justice incarnate. So you ready your silver bow, descend from Olympus, and face the python beneath the temple. -2-B. It's a gruesome fight. Slime and shadow coil around your ankles. Its hiss is a memory of every curse flung at your mother. It smells like rot and fear. You shoot, not once, but a dozen times. Arrows thud into flesh with the wet rhythm of revenge. And when it dies, twitching, you feel nothing, not peace, not triumph, just silence. You expect applause. None comes. Even the wind seems still. Artemis watches from afar, says nothing, then turns away. You don't know it yet. But your sister has seen enough of vengeance to know it never ends cleanly. Still, you wash the blood from your hands and declare the land sacred. Delphi will be yours. But guilt has a way of lingering. You can't undo the violence. So, in a twist of divine branding genius, you build an oracle, a mouthpiece to the future. You find a priestess, place her on a tripod, and whisper riddles into her soul. Speak not plainly, you tell her. Truth should shimmer. That's how it begins. Mortals flock to you, kings and beggars alike, desperate for answers, and you give them visions. Sometimes helpful, sometimes cryptic, always shimmering. Historians still argue whether your oracle shaped history or merely mirrored it. But you know the truth. You built Delphi not just as a beacon, but as penance. Because from the moment you killed that python, something curled in your chest, a little shadow, one that no sunlight, not even yours, could quite burn away. And so you shine brighter. You become the golden god, the healer, the seer, the musician whose chords stitch up wounds you once created. But even light can cast long shadows, especially when it's trying to outrun something it can't face. You stand alone now in the belly of the earth, breathing in the aftermath of your first great act. The python's body, long since decayed, leaves behind a cavern stained with the scent of damp stone and something older like the breath of time. Itself, Delphi pulses faintly under your feet. Not yet the jewel of prophecy it will become, but humming with that early potential. You've killed a monster, but you're starting to realize that doesn't always make you a hero. Mortals, soon, begin trickling in, drawn by word of mouth and the strange feeling that something sacred stirs in the rocks. They come not for blood, but for answers. So you polish your image. You handpick a priestess, a young woman with a quiet mind and a melodic voice. She sits atop the tripod, the fumes from a cleft in the rock wrapping around her like ghostly vines. You whisper riddles into her dreams. She wakes, speaking in spirals. Truth, you tell yourself, is better received when dressed like poetry. Over time, they will call this place Pytho, and later Delphi. Historians still argue whether the fumes were hallucinogenic gas or theatrical incense. Either way, mortals hear your voice in every cryptic phrase. A king's army marches east on your suggestion. A farmer marries his enemy's daughter. A mother abandons her newborn on a hill, believing the gods demanded it. You never meant for that one to happen. But that's the problem with oracles. People hear what they want, and speaking of unwanted consequences, you haven't forgotten the python. No, not quite. You established the Pythian Games to honor your guilt, veiled as glory. Athletic contests, poetry recitals, lyre competitions. It's your kind of apologia, celebratory smear of pageantry over a divine bloodstain. But you're not done trying to make sense of it all. You're restless. Still too young to sit still, too ambitious to drift. So you wander. And one day, deep in a pine forest, you hear music. It's not yours. It's not refined or elegant. It's raw, wild, and weirdly catchy. A kind of rustic jam session with animal skin drums and a flute that seems to laugh at its own rhythm. Curious, you follow the sound. You step into a glade, and there he is, half man, half goat, all confidence. His name, Marsyas. He doesn't bow, doesn't flinch, just plays his double pipe flute and grins. It's not exactly in tune, but it's bold. And boldness, often stirs trouble. You let him finish. Then you raise your lyre, pluck one string, and the wind changes. The trees lean in. Marsyas blinks. The forest stills. "Want to have a contest?" he blurts. "Loser does whatever the winner wants." Ah, mortals. Always making pacts they don't understand. You agree. But not out of spite, at least. Not yet. You're curious. You want to test your light against his chaos. So the contest begins. Judges are summoned, muses, nymphs, even a few impartial river gods. Marsyas plays first, whipping up a wild tune that makes dryads giggle and trees sway like tipsy dancers. It's fun. No one can deny it. Then you play, and suddenly, it's not fun anymore. It's transcendent. You weave melody with memory, light with longing. Every note is a golden thread through mortal hearts. When you finish, Marsyas looks well small, but he's not done. He ups the stakes. Let's play upside down. While singing at the same time, you pause. Is that fair? Is it even possible? But you're Apollo. You invented loopholes. So you flip your lyre and hum in harmony with your chords. Effortless Marsyas tries, fails. The flute was never meant. For vocals, he loses. And here's where things turn. You could have just embarrassed him. Let him slink away to his goat cave. But no, something inside you has curdled. Maybe it's the python's aftertaste. Maybe it's how the crowd laughed. A little too loud at your win. Maybe you just don't like being challenged. You tie him to a tree and flay him alive. Yes, even Eutha, god of music, of healing. You peel the skin from his body like bark from a tree. The forest goes silent. The grass wilts. The rivers murmur. Dirges, even the muses look away. You finish, but it doesn't feel like a win. It feels like rage, misplaced. Later, you hear a shepherd whisper to another, he was only trying to be heard. You remember that. You carry it to make amends or pretend you have you create the oloi, a new type of flute, fashioned from Marsyas's pipes. You scatter his blood across Phrygia, turning the soil red for generations. You whisper to mortals that this is how passion burns. They believe you. They even honor him. Marsyas becomes a symbol of mortal pride and divine punishment. But you know, better you didn't just punish arrogance. You punished daring. And in doing so, you chipped something vital from your own soul. From that day on, your music changes. It becomes ... Careful, still beautiful, but less wild. Less willing to risk. You start composing for control rather than joy. Structure over freedom, harmony over surprise. You don't realize it yet, but you've started to fear chaos, the very chaos that once inspired you. And in that fear, something else creeps in. Envy, the quiet kind. You begin to envy mortals, their freedom, their foolishness, their willingness to try because you're Apollo, you have to be right. Every time, so you begin crafting your image more tightly. You pose in marble. You speak in riddles. You become a symbol, a golden mask. But behind the glow, a question gnaws at you like a soft, insistent note in a song. What happens to a god when he stops surprising himself? Your reflection glows in still water, flawless, divine, untouchable. But lately, even you can tell, something is off. You lean in closer, half expecting your reflection to blink before you do. It doesn't. It simply stares back, all golden curls and untroubled poise. And that somehow troubles you most, so you leave Olympus again, craving novelty, challenge, something to remind you you're more than a well-posed statue. That's when you meet him, Hyacinthus, a mortal prince, Spartan, all carved limbs and laughter. He runs like the wind, but jokes like a bard. And when he first sees you, he doesn't flinch. He just says, "You look like you lose arguments for fun." You fall hard, together. You run races, skip stones, throw discus, and make each other laugh until your godhood starts to feel optional. The air around you warms, not just sunlit, but human. This is different from your other admirers. Hyacinthus doesn't worship you. He teases you, challenges you, makes you feel a little less like an abstract concept, and a little more like a person. One day, you're tossing the discus in a field scented with wild mint and bruised grass. It's sunny, of course. Always is when you're around. You throw, first, and the discus slices the sky like a halo. Hyacinthus claps, shouts something about showing off. Then he steps forward to retrieve it. And that's when it happens. A gust of wind too sudden, too sharp catches the disc, curves it midair, sends it flying toward Hyacinthus's temple. It strikes. He falls. You run, there's blood. You drop to your knees, cradling his body, golden hands trembling. You press against the wound, call his name, beg the earth to stop spinning. He blinks once, smiles faintly, then dash nothing. You stare at your hands, God's hands, healing hands. But the wound does not close. Nothing does. The wind laughs. You know that sound. It isn't natural. You rise, slow and boiling. Your eyes scan the horizon. And there he is, hovering like a grin in the air. Zephyrus, God of the west wind. Petty, quiet, jealous. He loved Hyacinthus. Too, you could strike him down. You could burn his fields and scatter his bones. But you don't. Not because you forgive him, but because it wouldn't bring Hyacinthus back. Instead, you kneel beside your lost love and do something mortal. You grieve. You whisper stories into the soil. Sing laments to the sky, and when your tears finally fall, they touch the earth and something grows. A flower. Crimson petals, shaped like drops of blood, curling inward like a sigh. You name it hyacinth, and tell mortals it means remember. Historians still debate whether the flower truly sprouted from Spartan soil, or if the story was embroidered. To fit a bloom doesn't matter. What matters is that you mourned. You, the sun god, cried over a boy, and in doing so, you did something rare among your kind. You changed. From that day, you watch your power more carefully. You speak more softly. You listen, sometimes. But you also harden in subtle ways. Love, you decide, is a gamble with too high a price, so when the next admirer arrives, you hesitate. His name is a beautiful youth, gentle and eager. He adores your writes poems, composes hymns, leaves flower garlands wherever you walk. At first it's flattering, then it becomes exhausting. You try to be kind, but kindness, you've learned, can't fix everything. You gift him a staggin, elegant creature, with ivory antlers and eyes like candlelight. A friend, you say, something you can care for, and he does. Too much, the stag becomes his companion. They nap under olive trees together, chase shadows at dusk. It is, ironically, the healthiest relationship Cyparisis has. Then comes the accident, a misfired arrow, meant for a boar. A single slip. The stag dies in Cyparis's arms, and the boy, he breaks, refuses food, refuses light. He sobs to the heavens, begs to die, begs you to let him grieve forever. You try to console him, but your words bounce off the cavern of his despair. Finally, you do what you think is merciful. You grant his wish. He becomes a cypress treacle, dark, ever weeping. You bless the species as sacred mourning trees. Funeral. Homes across Greece, start planting them. A botanical tribute to heartbreak, and you. You step back again. You swear to yourself. No more mortals. They're too fragile, too sincere. They fold themselves around you like ivy and die when you shift. You decide to focus on your temples, your art, your medicine. You compose hymns that sound like ceilings being lifted. You heal plagues, whisper answers into your oracle's mind, dazzle new acolytes with radiant smiles. You are good again, purposeful, controlled, but beneath the surface a dull ache settles. Not grief. Used to that now, it's ... emptiness. Like being full of light, but casting no shadow, and so, you polish your golden exterior, pose for another statue, deliver another riddle. The god of prophecy, the god of healing, the god of not getting too close, but at night, when the temples go quiet and the priests fall asleep, you sometimes revisit the field where Hyacinthus fell. You sit where the blood once pooled, now overgrown with purple bloom, and you wonder not aloud. never allowed if gods were meant to feel so much for creatures so brief. You touch the petals, and they shiver. Not from wind, from memory. You float not literally well. Actually, yes, literally. You're a god, but emotionally detached, aloof. That's the new plan. No more boys with soft smiles and breakable bones. No more bleeding heart ballads under olive trees. You're Apollo, son of Zeus and Leto, the bringer of light and law. You've decided to be ... untouchable. And just when you've nearly convinced yourself you're above all that squishy emotional stuff, she appears. Daphne, not like the others. Not sweet or adoring, she's fast wry. Wears her confidence like armor, and her hair in a wild braid that makes your fingers itch. A river nymph, daughter of the river god Peneus. You meet her mid-chases, sprinting through the woods, bow at on her back, eyes scanning for deer. Not drama, not adoration, just nature and movement and herself, naturally. You fall for her in about 0.7 seconds. You try a casual approach. Appear in a sunbeam, lean against a cypress tree, throw a well-practiced smirk. Nice aim, you say, gesturing to the arrow sticking out of a tree trunk 2 feet to your left. She doesn't even look at you, just knocks another arrow. I was aiming at you. You're smitten. You try again, poetry songs, even a subtle glope of your cheekbones. She's unimpressed. She's not playing hard to get. She's just not playing. Here's the twist. Though you're not acting entirely of your own accord, because that smug little mischief gremlin Cupidius that Cupid has been watching from a cloud, bored out of his chubby skull. You made fun of his archery skills, once called him a toddler with twigs. He didn't forget. So he fires 2 arrows, a golden one into your heart, to make you burn with love, and a leaden one into Daphne's, to make her recoil from it. Historians still argue whether this was a poetic metaphor or an actual divine prank. Either way, it's not going well for you, because now you're in love inconveniently, endlessly, embarrassingly, and she's in full-blown flight mode. Every time you appear, she bolts. It becomes a game you can't win. You're not used to losing. So one afternoon you chase her, through reeds, over rocks, across bubbling brooks. Your lyre bangs against your back. Your hair tangles in pine needles. You call her name. She doesn't slow. She's fast. Faster than seems possible. But you're a god, and you're catching up. The moment stretches, her breath ragged. Your hand inches from her shoulder, the forest opening ahead. And then she stops, falls to her knees beside a stream, and cries out, not to you, but to her father, Peneus, help me. And something ancient responds. Before your fingers can graze her skin, she begins to change. Her limbs harden. Skin becomes bark, fingers lengthen into twigs. Her hair thickens into rustling leaves. Roots burst from her feet and bury themselves in the soil. Her breath becomes wind. Her voice becomes the creak of wood. She becomes a laurel tree. You freeze, not from fear, not from confusion, but from the shock of witnessing something more powerful than desire. Choice. You drop to your knees before her. She stills. The bark around. Her chest is smooth, cool to the touch. Her branches tremble above you. The air smells of sap and finality. You whisper apologies. Promises. You swear you'll never touch her again. Instead, you honor her. You take a sprig of her leaves and weave them into a crown. This will be the symbol of victory, you say. Poets, kings, and heroes will wear her. And they do. The laurel wreath becomes the icon of greatness. But you wear it for penance. From that day, no matter how many statues they carve of you in marble, no matter how many songs echo your name across amphitheaters, you never again chase what does not run toward you first. You stand still, golden and solemn, and wait for the world to come to you. And that, ironically, makes them run faster. Daphne's absence carves a permanent hollow in your myth, the one you didn't get, the one who chose escape over eternity. She haunts you, not as a ghost, but as a boundary. A reminder that no matter how divine your light, some things are not yours to hold. So you become more careful. You craft rules, rituals, calendars. You build systems because chaos has teeth, and you've felt its bite. But deep down, you sometimes wonder if you're building temples just to keep from feeling lonely. After all, the laurel tree still stands, and some nights, when the wind rustles just right, you swear you can hear her laughter in the leaves. You visit from time to time, not to beg, not to speak, just to sit, to remember the chase that ended in stillness, to honor the one who taught you what no sounds like, even when whispered by a tree. And in that silence, you learn something vital. Even gods must accept the stories they don't get to finish. The silence around Daphne lingers longer than you'd like to admit. You return to Olympus wary not in body, never that but in the quiet ways only gods understand. The kind of wariness that settles behind the eyes and never quite leaves. You try to throw yourself into your usual distractions: healing, music, prophecy, solar alignment, seasonal rituals, but every lute string you pluck sounds like her voice turned away. So you change direction. You start looking outward again, past your own woes, past Olympus, toward Delphi. You've always had a connection to the sacred, but Delphi, this place, is different. A chasm in the earth, breathing vapors from the deep. The locals say Gaia herself once lived here, the navel of the world, a place thick with secrets and echoes. You decide it should be yours, only problem: it already is someone else. Python, no, not the programming language though, to be fair. He's just as difficult to debug. He's a monstrous serpent, ancient and territorial, the original guardian of the prophetic site. Not thrilled about your interest. Snakes, famously, do not play well with radiant light. You descend into the caverns anyway, bow slung over your shoulder, golden sandals tracking ash and moss. You don't sneak your Apollo, not Hermes, but you don't announce yourself either. You let your glow do the talking. Python slithers from the shadows, massive coils, thick as tree trunks, eyes like oil slicks. He hisses a challenge. You answer with an arrow. The fight is mythic. Coils constrict. Arrows fly. Rocks shatter. The earth trembles with each divine step. And Ulite incarnate pierce him again and again, until his body finally collapses into the chasm, smoking and silent. Victory should feel sweeter, but it doesn't. Not entirely, because this wasn't a monster of chaos. Python was Order's elder cousin, guardian of an old system, a matriarchal one. Some scholars argue he was Gaia's protector, and you, like so many male gods, just rewrote the script. You don't deny it. You rename the place anyway. Delphi, your new sanctuary, and to show you're not completely tone deaf, instead, you appoint a humane woman to speak for you. The Pythia, your oracle, chosen from among the locals. Usually an older woman past childbearing age, clad in white, seated on a tripod above the sacred vapors. She breathes deep, her eyes roll back, and your voice filtered through her own psyche. And the fumes emerges in riddles. People come from all over the world to hear you. Kings pause wars, farmers alter harvests, colonists redirect ships. You become the whisper that guides the masses, and you speak in puzzle language, because truth, you've learned, is too dangerous when handed out clean. You will go, you will return, never. In war will you perish. Doesn't help if you don't ask for punctuation. Sometimes the oracle gets it wrong. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes a question isn't really a question. It's a cry for reassurance, dressed in ceremony. But still, Delphi thrives. You build a temple. You bless priests. You compose hymns so haunting, even the wind hums them back. You even invent the Pythian games, like the Olympics. But more artsy. Music, poetry, drama. Not just bodies leaping and throwing, but minds shaping beauty. It suits you. You always preferred a well-tuned lyre to a javelin. Historians note that Delphi becomes one of the most influential sites in the ancient world, a place of peace where enemies leave weapons at the gate, where the only battle is for clarity, and you watch it all unfold from a distance, because even in Delphi, you never stay too long. Maybe it's guilt, or restlessness, or just habit. You've started to understand that you're better at setting things in motion than sitting still in them. Then one day, a visitor catches your eye. She doesn't kneel, doesn't tremble, just walks straight up to the sacred chamber, head high, shoulders squared. Her name is Cassandra, Princess of Troy, brilliant, sharp-eyed, fire behind the lashes. You feel it again, that pull, that curiosity. But you don't chase, you offer. I can give you the gift of prophecy, you tell her. Speak truth that none can deny. All I ask is, you don't finish, you don't need to. The look in your eye is enough, she considers, then nods. You place your fingers lightly on her temples, and for a moment, the world around you blurs. She sees past, present, futures branching like olive trees in drought. She gasps, then smiles, and then she turns away, refuses you. No kiss, no embrace, just cool, clean rejection. Your hands drop. You stare, heart wounded not with longing, but with insult. You don't take back your gift. You can't, but you curse. From that day forward, Cassandra can see the truth, but no one believes her. She warns her people of the wooden horse. They laugh. She predicts the fall of Troy. They mock. She sees her own death. No one listens. You don't watch it unfold. You tell yourself it's not your fault. You just enhanced the drama. Historians still argue if you acted out of spite or pain. If your curse was a punishment or a poetic twist. All you know is, she could have shared your light and chose to walk in shadow. You start to suspect you're real. Curse isn't your lovers dying or fleeing. It's that they see you and walk away. It's getting harder to tell if you're revered or avoided. They build you temples across the land, statues in every material from marble to moonstone. They paint your face golden, serene, idealized, and urns and walls and shields. To the outside world, you are the paragon of beauty, wisdom, and restraint, the most civilized god. But behind the polished veneer, you are fraying because you don't sleep. Gods don't need to, technically, but sometimes you envy mortals their dreams. You envy their endings. You envy their amnesia. You, on the other hand, remember everything, like Hyacinthus. Hyacinthus, the boy with laughter that made doves jealous. Spartan-born, fleet-footed. You met during one of your wanderings. He was throwing a discus with friends. The kind of sun-dappled afternoon that seemed designed for falling in love, and fall you did hard. He loved you back, too openly, tenderly, without the hesitation others carried. You taught him the lyre. He showed you how to wrestle in grass without dignity. You spent whole days doing nothing but laughing at the shapes clouds refused to make, the kind of love that makes other gods roll their eyes. Of course it couldn't. Last, Zephyrus, the west wind, also had his eye on Hyacinthus. Petty, possessive, perpetually blowing dramatic gusts where no gusts were needed. He saw the two of you together, saw Hyacinthus smile, that private little smile only meant for you, and that was it. Rage turned him reckless. One afternoon, while you and Hyacinthus tossed a discus back and forth, Zephyrus struck. He twisted. The wind curved the disc mid-flight. It struck Hyacinthus square in the head. He fell. The sound still rings in your ears, worse than thunder, worse than Python's dying hiss. You ran to him, cradled his broken body in your arms, called upon every herb, every chant, every spark of divine healing. But it was too late. His blood soaked the grass. You wept. You, Apollo, god of order and restraint, wept like a mortal father. And from the place where his blood touched earth, flowers bloomed, purple petals, shaped like a sigh. You named them hyacinths, so he'd never be forgotten. Some say the petals bear the Greek letters AIAI. Alas, alas. A cry of mourning etched in nature. Others argue that's just poetic embroidery. A late addition by romantic scribes. Historians still debate whether Zephyrus acted out of jealousy or accident. Whether you could have stopped him. Whether gods, like mortals, sometimes just lose. You stayed by Hyacinthus's grave for days. The other gods left you alone. Even Zeus, usually thunderously insensitive, gave you space when you finally rose. You weren't the same. You didn't smile at sunrise. You didn't sing to the seasons. You went quiet. People noticed. Farmers complained of muted crops. Artists found themselves uninspired. The world dimmed a little. Eventually you forced yourself to move again. You had responsibilities, plagues to contain, wars to ignore, festivals to bless, and then came Coronis, a princess of Thessaly. Sharp mind, sharper cheekbones, the kind of woman who could scold a lion into submission. You admired her intelligence. She respected your light. It felt companionable. You weren't burning with passion, like with Hyacinthus, or infatuated like with Daphne. Just warm, stable. You even entrusted her with your child, yes. A child yours. Asclepius, half-god, half-human. But you had high hopes. You whispered healing chants into Coronis's womb. Protected her with rays of gold. You saw a future. Then, one day you heard a whisper. From your sacred white raven, your divine messenger, Coronis has taken another lover. It said, you froze. You didn't want to believe it. So you stared into the raven's onyx eyes. Read the truth in its feathers. The betrayal sang louder than your lyre ever could. In rage, you turned the raven's feathers black, cursed it for bringing news you asked for. And then, without waiting for trial or explanation, you acted. You sent Artemis, your twin, your shadow, to do what you couldn't. Coronis was slain, a clean arrow through the heart. She died calling your name. But the moment her breath left her lips, you felt something deeper than fury, guilt, because she was carrying your child in a moment of mercy. Maybe redemption. You reached into her burning body and pulled him out. Asclepius. Your son, you gave him to Chiron, the wisest of all centaurs. A healer, a philosopher, a soft-spoken herb enthusiast with the patience of a rock and the kindness of a mother goose. And under Chiron's guidance, Asclepius grew, learned, healed. He became a legend in his own right, so skilled he could mend bones, cure blindness, even bring the dead back to life. That's when the trouble started, because Hades, your gloomy, morbid uncle, got wind of this miracle working, saw his underworld clientele dwindling. Not a fan of that, he complained to Zeus. Zeus, in his usual emotionally unintelligent way, panicked, decided this unnatural disruption of death's flow was unacceptable, so he struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. Just like that, gone, and you. You broke, you stormed Olympus, flames in your hair. Words you don't repeat outside of thunderstorms. You demanded justice. Instead, Zeus banished you to serve a mortal king. Yep, you, Apollo, god of healing, music, truth, and dignity, forced into divine community service. Historians mark this period as a symbolic humbling. Poets call it the gods' reckoning. You just remember the humiliation of sweeping stables for a man who thought ambrosia was a foot cream. But you did it, quietly, dutifully. You learned, slowly, the strange humility of mortality, that grief doesn't shrink with power, that even gods lose children, that even light casts long shadows. And you began to wonder. Maybe your curse wasn't just being seen. Maybe it was loving beings whose lifespans could only hold a fraction of you. The punishment ends, eventually. Time moves differently for gods, but humiliation lingers in mortal increments. You return to Olympus quieter, wiser at least. That's what you tell yourself. You've swept barns, buried lovers, fathered a boy who could raise the dead and still lost him to a lightning tantrum. You've lost so many, and yet you keep showing up. You wear your golden skin like armor. The other gods pretend not to notice the new edges in your voice. Even Dionysus, usually obnoxiously giddy, doesn't ask too many questions. You let the lyre rest. Your music feels like old clothes that don't quite fit anymore. So when another task falls to you, you barely blink. It starts with a king. It always starts with a king. This one is Laomedon, ruler of Troy before the famous war stuff. He's got a coastline full of riches, a sharp beard, and surprise. No interest in paying his debts. Zeus, in his typical let's teach them a lesson mode, decides to test him. Sends you and Poseidon, the ocean tantrum machine himself, to build Troy's massive walls. A divine construction project. You, who once sang starlight into existence, now laying bricks like a mason. But you do it. And the walls, immaculate, impenetrable, legendary, still standing centuries later in mythological memory. Laomedon. He thanks you by refusing to pay. You remind him politely that you are, in fact, a god. He reminds you rudely that gods aren't lawyers. You and Poseidon both bristle. But where you simmer, Poseidon erupts. He sends a sea monster, just lets it loose. A primordial horror from oceanic nightmares. Massive, slimy, unapologetically, anti-coastal tourism. Laomedon predictably panics. Tries to bargain, weasels around like a fish on a hook. Finally, he offers his daughter Hesione as sacrifice to appease the monster. Because, of course, the answer is always, let's throw a woman at it. But before the monster can feast, along comes Heracles' bronze muscles, lion skin cape, zero subtlety. He slays the beast, rescues the girl, and promptly demands his promised reward. Guess what? Laomedon stiffed him to dot pattern, much. Heracles doesn't take it well. He later returns, torch in hand, and reduces Troy to kindling, kills Laomedon, installs Priam, and resets the board for that whole Trojan War saga. You watch it all unfold from your sunlit vantage point. You're not surprised. Kings break promises, monsters rage, heroes pose dramatically. Same script, new actors, but somewhere inside, a small ember flares, a quiet satisfaction that justice, however brutish, was served still. You wonder, why do mortals summon gods only to forget their debts? Is awe that fleeting? Your thoughts drift to Marsys. Now that one stung. Marsyas was a satyr, half-man, half-goat. Full enthusiasm, he stumbled upon a flute the goddess Athena had thrown away. She'd crafted it herself, but discarded it after seeing her cheeks puff out unflatteringly. While playing, vanity, thy name is Olympus. Marsyas found the flute and somehow mastered it. He played with such wild, aching beauty that crowds wept. Meadows hushed. Even birds adjusted their songs. Then he made a mistake. He challenged you to a music contest. He, with his flute and fur and fevered passion. You with your golden lyre and an ego reinforced by centuries of devotion. The contest was held in Phrygia. Judges were chosen. The crowd gathered mortals, nymphs, even a few curious minor deities. You played first, sweet, structured, divine. Every note carved from sunlight. Then Marsyas played, and the world leaned in. His music was chaos, and craving, and the sound of loneliness curled up under a tree. It was raw, imperfect, real. People cried. Even you were moved. But you're Apollo. You don't lose, so you added a caveat. Let's play our instruments upside down, you said. Let's sing while we play. You, of course, could sing. While strumming, Marsyas blowing into a flute could not. He lost. And then you flayed him, strung him upside down from a tree, peeled him like an orange. They say the river nearby still runs red. Historians still argue why you did it. Whether the myth is metaphor, whether Marsyas represents art unfiltered, and you represent the tyranny of form, or whether you were just angry that someone uninvited touched your throne. Either way, your image dimmed a little that day. Even Olympus turned away. To make amends, you created a new song, soft, mournful, played only during twilight. The notes drift like petals on still water. You called it Lament of the Flute. No lyrics, just regret. But the memory stays. Even now, when you hear a distant pipe in the hills, you pause. Wonder if it's him again in spirit, reminding you that perfection isn't the same as soul. So you start changing. Slowly you whisper softer truths to the Pythia. You bless the awkward poets. You listen to imperfect music. And sometimes in the middle of the day when the sun is highest and your shadow shortest, you almost admit something dangerous to yourself. Maybe the light isn't enough. Maybe you envy the shadows their honesty, because the shadows never pretend. There's something unsettling about seeing your temples fade, not collapse dramatically with earthquakes or wars, just fade. Weathered stone, worn statues, priests who forget your chants, or worse, misquote them to bored crowds. Offerings get smaller, incense cheaper. Sometimes the fires don't even get lit. Once, your name would silence a room. Now you catch it in whispers, buried between lesser gossip. Did you hear? Apollo's oracle's gone quiet. And it's not untrue, because you've been quiet, not silent, just less loud. Even the Pythia, your faithful priestess at Delphi, has noticed. She still sits over the chasm, breathes in the vapors, lets her pupils widen with divine madness, but the words that come out are softer now, more cryptic, less booming declarations, more riddles wrapped in poetry. You've begun to prefer it that way. Let them work for it. Still, some days, you hover near the temple, invisible to mortals, just watching. You see Hertha, current Pythia, a girl with ink-stained fingers and calluses from olive harvesting, sit beside the tripod, mutter her own questions before yours arrive. She asks about her brother's illness, about the man she loves who doesn't love back, about whether you, Apollo, even listen anymore. And you do. You always have. But you've learned something over these centuries of chaos and love and flayed satyrs and broken kings. Prophecy is a burden. Mortals think they want truth, but what they crave is comfort, certainty, a version of the future with edges sanded off and no room for blood. Which brings us to Cassandra. Bright eyes, razor wit, a voice that could stop arrows mid-air. Princess of Troy. She worshipped you not blindly, but cleverly, understood the rituals, mastered the texts, asked smart questions. You admired that. So when she asked for the gift of prophecy, you agreed. You even flavored the deal with a kiss. She accepted both. But when the moment came to return affection, she recoiled, not cruelly, just honestly. She didn't love you. You'd given her truth. But she wouldn't offer you desire. And so, because you are Apollo, and gods bruise differently, you didn't revoke the gift. You cursed it. You let her keep her visions, but twisted the reception. From then on, no one would ever believe her. She'd scream fire and see none heed, cry war and be mocked, warn of betrayal, bloodshed, burning towers, and be called mad. Historians still debate whether this punishment was metaphorical or literal, whether Cassandra was a real priestess or an invention by poets to explain the tragedy of foresight. Either way, her name has become shorthand for doomed honesty. And you watched from your perch as Troy collapsed. You knew what would happen: the horse, the betrayal, the slaughter. Cassandra's warnings were true, but her people laughed, called her cursed. You did nothing, because sometimes even gods grow tired. Still, the guilt stayed quiet, like a song you once knew, but haven't played in ages. So you tried to change, tried being helpful. There's this brief chapter forgotten in most scrolls where you serve a mortal again, a shepherd this time, simple, poor, no need for prophecies or poetic justice. He just wanted his sheep to stop wandering off cliffs. You keep them safe. Play the lyre softly as they graze. Tell the stars to shine a little brighter, so he doesn't lose them in the dark. It feels nice. No theatrics. No temples, just usefulness. And in that stillness, you begin to notice something odd. Mortals, for all their fragility, move on. They bury their dead, sing their sorrows, fall in love again. You, meanwhile, collect grief like trophies. Hyacinth, Daphne, Coronis, Asclepius, Marsyas, Cassandra. Your heart is a museum of unfinished symphonies. One night, the shepherd asks you without knowing who you are if you've ever been in love. You pause, then lie. No, you say, not the lasting kind. He nods like he understands. But you know he doesn't, because mortals forget, gods remember still. You watch him fall asleep beside his flock, snoring gently, surrounded by wool and starlight. And for a moment, you feel it, the strange peace of being unimportant, of not being seen. And that night, you don't light the sky with grandeur. You let the moon take the stage, because sometimes even the sun needs rest. By now, you've figured out that immortality isn't the endless party mortals imagine. It's repetition. It's watching the same themes play out over millennia: greed, love, betrayal, lonely. The hairstyles change. It's being worshipped, then doubted, then turned into a quiz question. And you, Apollo, the shining one, the golden god of music and plague and prophesy. You've seen it all more times than you can count. But there's one name you still speak in a whisper, even when no one's around. Daphne. Remember her? You do. Of course you do. She was a nymph, a daughter of a river god. Wild and stubborn and uninterested, the kind of woman who preferred trees to temples and silence to suitors. You, freshly flushed with victory from slaying the python at Delphi, spotted her in the woods, and something in you, call it divine arrogance or something softer, lonelier, decided she was meant for you. You pursued, she fled. The harder you chased, the faster she ran. Your breathless praises didn't soften her pace. Your immortal charm didn't slow her panic. And when she saw you gaining ground, she screamed for her father, and he answered in a blur of bark and brittle magic. He transformed her into a laurel tree. Right there, mid-sprint, skin to bark, hair to leaves, heartbeat to hollow wood. You reached her just as she changed. Laid your hand on her trunk, still warm. You wept. For the first time in what felt like centuries. And then, to remember her, or maybe to forgive yourself, you made the laurel sacred, crowned poets and warriors with its branches, wore it around your brow like a badge, as if turning your greatest failure into a symbol could rewrite the ending. Historians still argue about the lesson of Daphne's story. Was it about consent, the wildness of nature, divine ego? You don't argue, you just remember, because that moment, that no, carved into the world by bark and leaves, never left you. After Daphne, you changed the way you looked at women. Not always, not perfectly, but something softened. The chase lost its appeal. Even your music began to sound different. Less triumphant, more melancholic. Notes hung longer in the air, like sighs. And that's when you met Cyrene. Another wild one, but she didn't run. She wrestled lions, literally, in Libya, no less. You watched her from afar, expecting the same pattern approach. Praise, rejection, instead. When you appeared, she squared her shoulders and asked, "What do you want?" You didn't lie. You told her she intrigued you. She didn't swoon. She nodded, and that's how it started. With honesty, no spells, no tricks, just two strong creatures finding something rare. Respect, she bore you a Sonaristes, the god of beekeeping and cheesemaking, oddly enough. Gentle pursuits, domestic, sweet. You loved him. You even tried sticking around, did your best mortal. Impersonation helped him raise hives, explained the wind. But the sun doesn't stop rising, and gods don't linger long. You left not abruptly, just gradually. Like the end of a song no one notices, fading dots still. That chapter felt good, not perfect. but honest, and it taught you something. Sometimes, love is letting go before it turns tragic. You learned that lesson again with Coronis. She was mortal, lovely, brave, pregnant with your child, but she strayed. Fell for a mortal man while carrying your divine seed. You found out via raven. Black as midnight tanned in a fit of divine rage, sent Artemis to slay her. Instant regret, because of course you loved her, or thought you did. But even love doesn't override that old god curse, the demand for loyalty. You arrived too late to save her, but not too late to save your child. From her funeral pyre, you pulled the infant Asclepius, future god of medicine. You gave him to Chiron, the wise centaur, told him, raise this boy to heal, and he did. Asclepius became the greatest doctor the world would know. Could cure anything, wounds, plagues, even death, which naturally got him in trouble. Hades complained. Zeus, ever touchy about the boundaries between living and dead, struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. You snapped, stormed Olympus, broke rules, demanded answers, and when you didn't get them, you killed the Cyclopes, the ones who forged Zeus's Thunderbolts. Yes, you did that. A rare moment when your rage burned brighter than your wisdom. Zeus punished you against you back into servitude. But this time, you didn't mind. Not really, because mourning, you've learned, is easier when your hands are busy. As for Asclepius, Zeus eventually made amends, immortalized him, gave him a constellation of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, so your sun became a star, and you began to wonder if light is ever really enough. Because no matter how many you save, there are always more who slip through your fingers. Still, you keep shining, because that's what you do, even when you don't want to, even when no one asks. You rise. You rise. Every morning, without fail, even when the world forgets you, even when your temples lie empty and ivy snakes up the columns, even when you pass overhead and not a single prayer floats upward, you rise, because the sun never gets a day off. And isn't that the irony? You, Apollo, the golden god, the bringer of light, the inspiration behind more songs and poems than even you can count, have become reliable, predictable, dependable, which, in the divine world, is another word for boring. You used to be dazzling, uncontainable. Now, you're a clock, a torch on a stick. Mortals talk more about your cousin Dionysus, drunken chaos and wild parties, than they do about you. You're the sensible god now, the one whose myths are too well-behaved to make the gossip rounds, except, of course, when they're not. Take Niobe, for example. She made the fatal error of mocking your mother. Why should people worship Leto, she said, who only had 2 children, when I have 14? And maybe she had a point. Maybe. But hubris like that doesn't go unchecked, so you and Artemis paid her a visit. One by one, her children fell. Some say you took 6, some say 9. Scholars can't agree. Historians still debate whether Niobe's tale is a moral about piety, or just the tragic randomness of divine wrath. All you know is her screams echo still, and when she fled to Mount Sipylus and turned to stone from grief, even you felt it. That chill in the spine, that pause in the music. Because grief, even righteous grief, is heavy. You didn't sing for a while after that, and maybe that's why you started spending more time among mortals again. Not as a god, just as a man, quiet. Observing you show up as a stranger in a small village, fix a broken lyre string, help a child name the constellations, share a riddle with a fisherman, and then vanish before they ask who you are. There's a charm in it, the anonymity. It reminds you of the first time you tried mortality. Back when Zeus punished you for killing the Cyclopes, and you were forced to serve a mortal King Admetus. Now, Admetus wasn't the worst master. He was kind, honest, almost embarrassingly polite. You liked him, actually liked him. So when the fates declared his time was up, you bargained. No small feat, the fates don't negotiate, but you played your harp. whispered in the right ears, twisted the threads of destiny just enough, got them to agree that Admetus could live if someone volunteered to die in his place. Nobody did, not his servants, not his friends, not even his parents. Only Alcestis, his wife, stepped forward, said she'd do it. You watched her die, and something in you cracked. You couldn't accept it. Not this time, so you bargained again, this time with Thanatos, Death himself. Now, Death isn't easy to reason with. He's not cruel, but he's stubborn, obsessed with balance. But you, Apollo, god of reason, of medicine, of song, out-argued him. Or maybe outsang him. Depends on which poet you believe. In the end, you brought Alcestis back. Alive and Admetus, he never forgot. Every year after that, he lit a torch at sunset, placed it on the temple steps, and said, "Thank you." Never asked for anything else. That's the kind of devotion you miss. Not the orgiastic festivals or animal sacrifices, though those were energetic. But the quiet gratitude, the offerings of figs and olive oil, the whispered, "Please help" before battle, the carved initials in tree bark. You see fewer of those now, because in this era, you're a museum piece, an interesting myth, a hashtag on aesthetic Instagram accounts. Still, you endure. You get rebranded every few centuries. In Rome, they called you Phoebus, gave you a new haircut, and said, "Now you're all about logic and poetry, and maybe even medicine too." You went with it. Adaptability is divine, and yet, under all the names, you remain the same. Bright, distant, warm, but not safe. You've been in every kind of story. The romantic tragedy, the revenge epic, the cautionary tale, the healer's hymn, the villain's revenge, and now you're drifting again. Sometimes in the modern world, you sneak into a music classroom, sit in the back, listen to a child falter through a violin solo. You want to help, but you don't, because it's better if they think they did it alone. Sometimes you walk the hospital corridors invisible, nod at the exhausted intern, whisper just enough courage to make them pick up the scalpel again, and sometimes you slip into dreams, not with visions or doom, but just melody. Something soft, reassuring. Maybe that's your final form. Not God, not symbol, not punishment, but music. The kind you hear when the world is still and the heart is heavy. Not to fix anything, just to remind mortals that someone, somewhere, is still listening. You're always listening. That's the thing no one really gets. They think gods only hear the big stuff, the prayers shouted on mountaintops, the offerings laid at gold-trimmed altars. But you catch the muttered wishes, the half-sung lullabies, the desperate whispers muttered into cracked rear-view mirrors. You never stopped listening, not even when they stopped believing. Especially not then, because belief, you've realized, doesn't sustain God's memory does. And there's one place where memory burns hottest. Delphi, your temple, your sanctuary, your masterpiece, built above the spot where you slew Python, its very foundation steeped in that old mythic venom. A place of prophecy, of riddles, of truth wrapped in poetry and fog. It wasn't always yours. You know Delphi belonged to Gaia once, then to Themis, the titaness of divine law, then Phoebe. Only after all of them did you take it. With blood, yes, but also song. You cleansed the site, made it yours, crowned it with the Pythia, your oracle, seated above a chasm that breathed strange vapors. Historians still argue whether the fumes were hallucinogenic gas or just poetic license. But you know better. It was never about the gas. It was about the question. Mortals came from all corners of the earth to ask the oracle what lay ahead. Would the crops grow? Should we go to war? Is the child mine? And the Pythier priestess spoke in riddles. Words so layered that even truth hid behind a curtain. You liked that because, if there's one thing you know, it's that truth is never simple. It's not just light and dark, it's all the colors in between. the part of the sunrise that blinds you if you look too directly. People feared the Pythia, revered her, misinterpreted her constantly. But you stood behind her, whispering. She couldn't lie, but she didn't have to explain. Take Croesus, the king of Lydia. He asked if he should wage war on Persia. Your oracle told him, if you cross the river, a great empire will fall. He thought that meant Persia. He was wrong. It was his empire that crumbled, and you didn't correct him because you told the truth. And truth, as you've learned, often offends the expectations more than it serves clarity. You once said, know thyself. It became etched into the stones at Delphi. Mortals love to quote it. They tattoo it. They print it on coffee mugs. But few of them understand it, because knowing yourself, it's the hardest thing. It means facing your own selfishness, your old wounds, your contradictions. It means realizing that even a god, yes, even you can be wrong, petty, cruel. It means remembering the women you chased, the lovers you lost, the sons you couldn't protect, the kings you misled, the music that turned into silence, and accepting that it all still lives inside you. You've seen so many mortals come and go, their lives flickering like candle flames in a drafty temple. But every now and then, one surprises you. There was that boy in Delphi once, a stutterer, overlooked by his family, mocked by priests, but he listened, watched the patterns of wind and fire. One day, he whispered a question at the edge of your sanctuary. You heard it, and you answered not through the Pythia, not through riddles, but in a burst of melody, a bird call in the wrong season, a gust of wind that carried the answer straight into his waiting mind. He grew up to become one of the greatest mathematicians in his city, never claimed it was you, never needed to dot, and that was enough. You've always liked subtlety. It's why you're the god of plague and healing. A paradox, sure, but life is full of them. You send disease, then show mortals how to cure it. Because pain in your domain is often the first note in a longer symphony. People forget you started the Trojan War, or helped it begin. At least you sided with the Trojans mostly. Sent plagues when Agamemnon disrespected your priest. Guided Paris's arrow into Achilles' heels. Say, your hand actually steered it. Why? Maybe because you didn't like arrogance. Maybe because you saw the shape of history and nudged it toward the ending you preferred. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because the world needed a hero to fall, to remind them that even gods can't shield mortals from the consequences of pride. You've never enjoyed war. That's Ares' arena. But you understand it, the rhythm of it, the need sometimes for fire to clear the old trees so something new can grow still. You always weep afterward. You don't show it. But every city left in ruins, every temple abandoned, every harp string snapped by a grieving hand, you feel it. Because every death is a note lost from the song of the world, and you're trying so hard to hold the melody together. Even now, even as temples crumble and languages shift, and gods are turned into metaphors, you still rise, still listen, still sing, because maybe that's what being a god is. In the end, not ruling, not punishing, just witnessing and loving anyway. Sometimes when you're high above the Aegean, your golden chariot trailing heat and hymns across the sky, you let yourself drift, not physically, never that. The sun must stay its course, but mentally. You coast through memories like old sheet music, each moment a note, some sharp, some flat, all aching with their own kind of beauty. You remember Hyacinthus, a boy too radiant to belong to mortals, and yet somehow too fragile to belong to the gods. You loved him, not in the distant, poetic way gods love their creations, but truly you threw discus together under the olive trees. Laughed until the wind carried your joy to the ears of jealous gods. Jealous Zephyrus, the west wind, whose love Hyacinthus did not return. So when your discus soared one afternoon, Zephyrus twisted its path, made it curve just wrong, just enough, and it struck Hyacinthus down. Blood on the grass. that quiet moment after the heart stops, when the air forgets how to move. You fell to your knees, tried everything, every salve, every chant, every ounce of divinity, but he was gone, so you wept, and from your tears and his blood you called forth a flower, a hyacinth. It still blooms in spring, curling like a lock of his hair, and maybe, if you look closely, you'll see the petals' veins curve into letters .ai.4ii. Alas, even your griefs turn into beauty. Followers, mortals, who stirred that strange divine ache in your chest. Cassandra, for instance, she asked for the gift of prophecy. You granted it willingly, joyfully. But when she refused your love, you didn't take the gift back. No, that would have been too merciful. Instead, you cursed it. She would always speak the truth, but no one would ever believe her. Historians still debate whether it was justice or cruelty. The poets say it was tragic irony, but you know it. Was anger poorly masked as logic, and you regret it. You watched her scream warnings at the Trojans. You watched her claw at the walls of the city while others laughed. You heard her whisper, "He's hiding in the horse." While men rolled it through the gates, no one listened, and when the fires came, you turned away. You couldn't watch your temples in Troy burned too. But you didn't stop loving her. That's the thing. Even in your wrath, love lingered. And that more than any plague or prophecy. What makes you dangerous? Because your love burns. It purifies, it demands something back. You tried once, just once to set it down to live a simple life. When you took mortal form again, in a story few people remember. A young man named Ion, raised by temple priests, not knowing he was yours. Born of a mortal woman you once seduced or tricked, depending on the version and left behind. She abandoned him at birth, wrapped in cloth, embroidered with serpents and laurel leaves, left to the fate of the temple's kindness. But he survived, grew strong, kind. He spoke well, thought deeply, listened. You watched from afar, never revealing yourself, and when the truth of his birth threatened to break him, you intervened not with thunder or music, but with clarity, quiet truth, a reveal not meant to dazzle, but to heal. He accepted it, didn't worship you, didn't curse you either, just moved forward, and that was enough. Because not every child of Apollo needs to carry a lyre or shoot a bow. Some just need to exist tonelessly, fully, freely. And that brings you to the part mortals rarely think about. Your children, oh, you have many. Some known like Asclepius, the god of medicine, who learned to bring the dead back to life until Zeus struck him down for violating the balance. And you struck back. Killed the Cyclopes who forged Zeus's thunderbolt, got punished again. But the grief of a parent, that's something no punishment can really touch. Asclepius lives on. In a way, every time a doctor heals without hope. Every time a doctor heals without hope. Every time a nurse whispers comfort in a dim room. Every time a child draws a sun on the corner of a crumpled hospital pamphlet. He's there, you're there. Because gods never really disappear. They just evolve. You've become a metaphor for vision, for clarity, for reason. Your name gets scrawled on chalkboards in psychology lectures. Your stories dissected by bored freshmen in oversized hoodies who don't know you once danced until the mountains swayed. But some still. Remember, they light candles to you before an exam, sing a line from an old hymn, not knowing why it comforts them, paint you with gold leaf in underground. Art studios where incense still curls upward like a prayer. And every once in a while, when someone plays a melody so honest it silences the room, you are there in the final note, lingering, smiling, still burning, still rising, because you are not just a god. You are what mortals reach for when they want to be more. It starts to unravel just a little when the world forgets how to read the stars. Not because you care about astrology, though. To be fair, you did invent it. But because when mortals stop looking up, They forget to wonder, and wonder, more than worship, has always fed you. Still, you endure. You adapt in ancient Rome. They call you Phoebus, the shining one. They merge you with the sun itself, blur the edges between Apollo the archer and Sol Invictus. You don't mind, it's not accurate, but it's poetic. And you've always had a soft spot for poetry. Historians still argue whether the Romans truly believed you were the same as the sun or just used the metaphor as imperial propaganda. Honestly, it's probably both. The emperors loved their shiny symbols. Augustus, in particular, adored you. He built you a temple beside his house, declared you his patron, claimed that your guidance had helped him win the Battle of Actium. You liked Augustus. Understood that power isn't just about strength, it's about story. The myth-makers in his court rewrote you into marble, the divine twin of Rome's moral revival. Chastity, harmony, law. You went along with it. Smiled for the statues, blessed the poets. But you never forgot who you really were, because under every polished column, there's a cracked foundation, and under every empire a story longing to be told differently. Your temples flourished for centuries. But then came the shift. Christianity, not at first a whisper, a shadow on the edge of the empire, but it grew fast, fierce, full of fire and certainty. And soon enough, your temples were being shuttered, your statues broken, your hymns silenced. One day, a bishop declared Delphi a place of demons. The Pythia was dismissed as madness, and your name, Apollo, became a byword for the old gods. The ones who didn't save. You didn't fight it, not the way Ares would have, with swords and blood. Instead, you retreated. Not out of cowardice, but out of endurance, because you knew something they didn't. Gods don't die, they're recycled, rewritten, recalled. In moments of strange beauty you watched as the Enlightenment thinkers rediscovered your name, not in temples, but in telescopes, in treatises, in symphonies. You watched as your musicure light slipped back into the world, not through altar smoke, but through science and art. And that, perhaps, is your greatest trick. You became an idea.unkillable. There was that one time, centuries later, when a group of humans dared to name a spaceship after you. The Apollo program, they launched it toward the moon, and you wept not because they were flying too close to your domain. Oh, you've always shared your sky with those bold enough to reach for it, but because they remembered even after millennia, after conversions and crusades, after translations and betrayals, they remembered. You rode with them, silently. No lyre, no laurel crown, just stardust, humming against the hull. And when that first footprint settled into lunar soil, you felt the universe hum a single golden note. Perfect. Pitch. You've watched their art evolve too. Your image appears in comic books now, in anime, in sculpture, gardens, and mixtapes and tattoo parlors, not always flattering. Sometimes you're vain, sometimes cruel, sometimes reduced to a shiny boy with too much eyeliner and a tragic backstory. But hey, at least they're still talking about you. There's that quirky little detail you like. In the early Renaissance, alchemists associated you with sulfur, not just because of the sun, but because sulfur was seen as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Sulfur, flame, transformation. You've always been a threshold, a portal, the space between song and silence, truth and illusion, day and night. And thresholds, as it turns out, never go out of style. You're also oddly popular with architects. Did you know that? They study your temples for their proportions, their sacred geometry. Even in modern blueprints, your ratios sneak in. The golden mean, the number of columns, the spacing of shadows. Your math is still whispering. There was a building recently, a concert hall in Berlin, designed with acoustics, so perfect that even the faintest cough sounds like a confession. They didn't name it after you, but you recognized yourself in the walls, and that's enough, because names change, but presence presence endures. You don't need incense anymore. You just need anyone, to pause when a sunrise spills perfectly through their window, to hum a tune they don't remember learning, to feel that strange electric shiver when a story hits just right. That's where you live now, in the gaps between knowing and feeling, in the back of the throat when someone's about to speak their truth, in the pause before a string quartet begins. You're still here. You never left. And yet, despite the light, the temples, the whispered songs, you're still not always loved, worshipped, yes, invoked, frequently, but loved. That's trickier, because loving you means confronting a paradox. You bring both healing and plague, clarity and madness, poetry and punishment. You are beauty sharpened into blade. Even your twin sister, Artemis, with her wild independence and moonlit strength, sometimes side-eyes your flair for dramatic revenge. You could try being less theatrical, she once said. After watching you turn a chorus of mocking boys into dolphins, you smirked. They're happier that way. She wasn't convinced. But that's the thing about twins. You balance each other, moon and sun, bow and lyre, her silence, your sound. You've always been in orbit with her, sometimes aligned, sometimes distant, always tethered by a shared beginning. Born on the island of Delos, after your mother Leto wandered across a cruel world of closed doors and jealous queens. Hera, Zeus's wife, had forbidden any land from offering Leto shelter. Only Dothraki floating, unwanted, dared take her in. And so you were born there. Twin sons breaking from a woman, abandoned and aching. Historians still debate whether the myth of your birth on a moving island was symbolic. Perhaps Delos represented a kind of exilic resilience. Others think the island's sanctuary status helped shape the myth, retrofitting geography into theology. You don't mind either way. You just remember that first breath, and the way your cry lit up the sky. From the moment you arrived, people expected greatness, or at least noise. You delivered both. But there's a moment not often told, when you were still small, still new to godhood, and you watched a flock of cranes flying south, not with power, just purpose. And you felt a flicker of envy. They had no temples, no myths, no followers, just instinct, motion. You've chased meaning ever since. There's something almost human in that. Your worshippers often expect you to be above longing. But how could you compose poetry without ache? How could you offer visions without ever knowing what it is to yearn? So yes, you've made mistakes. Marsyas, for one, that satyr who challenged you to a musical duel, thinking he could outplay a god on the aloes, that double-piped flute he found lying in the grass. Fun fringe tidbit. It was originally Athena's, but she tossed it when she saw the way it puffed out her cheeks. Vanity, maybe, or just awareness of optics. Marsyas played beautifully. Some say the forest wept. Others claim his notes made the rocks lean closer, and you played the lyre. Elegant, divine, precise. But when it came to judging, the muses paused. You were better, but not by much. So you added a twist. Whoever could play their instrument, upside down, would win. He couldn't, you. Cootie lost, and then, in one of your darkest moments, you flayed him alive. Poets tried to justify it, said it was about pride, about challenging the natural order. But deep down, you know it wasn't justice. It was insecurity. A god who needs applause is already trembling. You've learned since then, at least. You hope so. There was a temple once, carved into a cliff, where pilgrims left, not gold or laurel, but songs, handwritten, off-key. Honest. One was written by a boy who had lost his mother, another by a woman trying to find her voice after a long, bruising silence. They left their lyrics. On the altar, you read every one, didn't judge, didn't strike anyone down. Just let the wind carry them into your memory, because that's what you've become. Not just a god of perfection, but of process. You've stood beside out-of-tune choirs, untrained poets, trembling speakers who don't believe they're worth listening to. And you've whispered, try again, because while you may be divine, you understand the mortal desire to be heard. Your favorite story? Not the one about defeating the python. Not even the time you saved the world from darkness by threatening to disappear. No, your favorite is the quiet one, the myth no one tells. The time you watched a child in a field hum a melody that made the birds go still. No audience, no acclaim, just truth. And in that moment, you smiled. You didn't intervene, didn't make her famous, didn't even let her see you. You just held the moment. Because sometimes the greatest praise isn't shouted. It's felt. So now, when people ask where Apollo has gone, they expect clouds, thunder, a fanfare of flame, but really, you're in every corner of the world where someone tries to speak their heart out loud. In recording booths, on late-night balconies, in journals, in drumbeats, in the trembling silence before a poem begins. And maybe, just maybe, you're in this voice right now, whispering a story into someone's half-lit room, you still rising, still reaching, still learning to love, even in the cracks. The end, if it can even be called that, is not a fall, it's a soft diffusion. You are still here, but no longer the blinding centerpiece of worship. More like a warm undercurrent beneath civilization's skin. Your statues gather moss now. Not all of them. Some still gleam in museums, posed in impossible contrapposto, with expressions too serene to trust. But most stand in ruins. Missing arms, empty eyes, laurel crowns cracked by time, and yet even there you shine theirs. A temple in Turkey Didyma, where ivy wraps around your old columns like a lover who never stopped waiting. Tourists take selfies among the stones, unaware that the acoustics still carry a perfect pitch if someone dares to sing. You linger in those places, not as power as presence, and you've had time. Gods know you've had time to reflect. What do you feel now when people say your name with air quotes? When they refer to you as myth? When some forget you entirely, oddly? You feel relief, because worship is a heavy crown, and perfection, an even heavier chain now, free from expectation. You can simply exist. You appear in dreams again, to command but to listen. You visit lonely children and broken artists, baristas who hum Vivaldi while sweeping floors, and astrophysicists whose whiteboards bloom with theories that spiral like your music once did. You ride through headphone wires and satellite signals and cracked violin cases. You no longer demand temples. You inhabit memory. You were the god of light, and now you've become the echo of illumination. The moment before someone realizes they're about to understand something, a breath, a flicker, a possibility, and still, even now, you carry contradictions. You are healing and harm, melody and silence, a predator's gaze and a poet's ache. But perhaps that is the point, because humanity never needed tidy gods, it needed mirrors. And you, Apollo, have always held up a dazzling, dangerous one. You showed mortals how to shine, how to fracture, how to rise, even when broken. And now, in a world lit more by screens than sunrises, your domain has expanded. Light is everywhere, so you walk among them, quiet, curious, unseen. Occasionally someone will say, "There's something beautiful about this moment, and I don't know why." And that's you. A brushstroke, a stanza, a warmth that doesn't beg explanation. Maybe that's the revenge. After all, not thunder, not plague, but endurance. Because the gods who roar eventually fade. The ones who whisper, they last forever. And as you settle into this new form, scattered, refracted, eternal Lu, understand what Artemis meant when she said you never needed their devotion. You just needed to be remembered. And you are. You always will be. Even now, even here, even as this voice fades, you're still glowing. So now, as the last flickers of Apollo's story curl into quietness, you let the tempo slow, the lyre's final Note softens into something like memoria. Note no longer heard, but felt. Like the hush of breath right before a dream begins, you lean back into the silence, warm with the echo of centuries. And maybe you're thinking about this strange path Apollo took from golden chariots to dusty ruins, from savage trials to whispered moments of beauty. Or maybe you're not thinking at all. Maybe you're just letting the imagery settle, the sun draping over a ruined temple, a half-remembered melody, a flicker of something sacred inside, something ordinary. That's the beauty of these ancient stories. They start big gods and monsters, rage and thunder, but they always narrow down to something intimate, a feeling, a truth, a question that's been quietly haunting you without a name. Are you the music or the silence between the notes? Are you chasing perfection or learning to sit with the ache? No need to answer now, just breathe. Let the hum of the room return, the steady tick of your own pulse, maybe a distant car, or the low, comforting whir of a fan. The night doesn't demand anything from you. It's just here, so let yourself settle, eyes heavy, mind soft, because in this hush, Apollo's still singing, just for you, and tomorrow the sun rises again. But for now, you rest.